My name is Shanna Howell, and I'm 36 years old. This summer, my mother gave away a vacation I had planned and paid for. A week at a beautiful resort down in the Florida Keys. The trip I'd booked for myself as a gift to myself. And she handed the whole thing to my spoiled older sister and her 3 children, like it was hers to give. When I stood there in my mother's kitchen, not quite believing it, she looked at me and said, "The thing I'll remember for the rest of my life." She said, "Oh, don't be dramatic, Shauna. It's not like you had anyone to bring anyway. Roxanne has the kids. They'll actually use it. You can still come. Of course." And then she smiled and added the part that turned my stomach to ice. "You can help with the children. Somebody's got to watch them at the pool while Roxanne relaxes. And you'll cover the incidentals, won't you, since it's all under your name already? You're so good with the money part." That was the offer. I was welcome to come on my own vacation as the babysitter. Who paid? I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't cancel the trip in a rage, the way some part of me wanted to. I've spent 36 years being the calm one, the reliable one, the one who handles things. And for once, that training served me. I just nodded, and I said, "Okay, Mom." And I went home. And then I made one quiet phone call. I didn't tell anyone I'd made it. I let them pack, I let them get excited. I let my sister post about her girls' trip with the kids online. And on check-in day, when my sister walked up to that resort's front desk with her 3 children and all their luggage, expecting the week in paradise my mother had promised her, the clerk typed in her name and frowned and typed again, and my sister sank to the floor of that lobby, right down onto the marble, in front of her kids, in front of the whole line of people behind her. Because the reservation wasn't under her name. It had never been under her name. It was under mine. And I had made one phone call and quietly taken back the only thing that had ever made any of this possible. I want to tell you this story slowly and properly because it isn't really a story about a vacation. The vacation is just the place where 36 years of something finally came due. It's a story about being the kind of person a family decides early on is for using. And what happens one summer when she finally remembers she was never required to consent to that, and that she'd been holding the one card that could end it the whole time. Before I go any further, if you've ever been the family ATM, the built-in babysitter, the one whose own things get handed to someone more deserving, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps this story reach the people who need it. And drop your city and the time where you're listening from in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel at night. I'm Shauna. This is the story of the vacation I planned for myself, the family that decided it belonged to someone else, and the single phone call that reminded them all whose name was actually on it. To understand the phone call, you have to understand 36 years of being the daughter who didn't count, and the sister who paid for everyone who did. There are 2 of us. Roxanne is 3 years older, and from the time we were small, my sister was the one the whole house bent itself around. Roxanne was the pretty one, the charming one, the one my mother called her spirited girl. Spirited was my mother's word for what everyone else would have called spoiled. Roxanne threw tantrums and got rewarded for them. Roxanne wanted something, and got it. Roxanne broke things, toys, curfews, promises, and the breakage was always smoothed over, always somebody else's job to clean up. And usually that somebody was me. Let me give you one picture because it's the whole childhood in miniature. When I was 12 and Roxanne was 15, our parents saved up to take us to a theme park, a real treat, the kind of thing we did maybe once. Roxanne wanted a particular expensive souvenir, a stuffed thing the size of a person, and when our mother said it was too much, Roxanne pitched a fit right there in the gift shop, loud enough that strangers stared. And my mother bought it. To make the scene stop, to make her spirited girl smile again, she bought the enormous, expensive thing. And then, walking out, she turned to me, quiet me, who hadn't asked for anything, and said, "Now, Shauna, you're not going to be difficult about a little toy too, are you? I knew I could count on you." And I, 12 years old, learned the lesson in real time, that wanting things got punished in me and rewarded in my sister, that my reward for not wanting was being praised for not wanting, and that the praise was just a leash with a nicer name. And me, I was the other one, the reliable one. From a very young age, my role in the family was clarified for me, gently and constantly. Shauna is the sensible one. Shauna doesn't need a fuss. Shauna can handle it. It sounds like praise until you live inside it. Being the sensible one meant my needs were always the ones that could wait, because I was the one mature enough to wait. And waiting, it turned out, was a thing you could be assigned forever. Roxanne got the new clothes because Roxanne would pout. I got the hand-me-downs because I was too sensible to care about that sort of thing. Roxanne got the attention because Roxanne demanded it. I got told how proud they were that I never demanded anything. I learned the lesson every overlooked, over-responsible child learns, that love in my family was something you received for being a problem, and what you got for being good was used. The reward for reliability was more responsibility. The reward for handling things was being handed more things to handle. And slowly, over decades, without anyone ever deciding it out loud, I became the family's infrastructure. The one who organized, who remembered, who drove, who showed up early and stayed late, and eventually who paid. Especially who paid. Because I did the sensible thing with my life. I became an accountant. I'm good with money, careful, I plan, I save. And in a family with one spoiled daughter who never saved a dime, being the careful one with money doesn't make you respected. It makes you the bank. An ATM they were all a little annoyed at for having withdrawal limits. The irony was never lost on me. The very competence that should have earned respect instead marked me as a resource. Roxanne's chaos with money made her someone to be rescued, over and over, with sympathy. My carefulness with money made me the one expected to do the rescuing. She got bailed out for being irresponsible. I got billed for being responsible. I want to tell you specifically about being the babysitter, because it's the wound the vacation pressed directly onto. When Roxanne had her kids, Bren first, then Kaylin, then little Dee, I loved them instantly and completely. I still do. I need you to hear that because of where this story goes. Those children are not the villains here, but I also became, the moment they were born, my sister's unpaid, on-call, permanent childcare. Roxanne treated my time as a resource she owned. Shauna doesn't have kids of her own. She has all this free time. Shanna's so good with them, and it's not like she's got other plans. Date nights, spa days, weekends away. I watched those kids for all of it, for years, for free. And the one time I gently said I had plans of my own, my mother told me I was being selfish, that family helps family, that Roxanne was overwhelmed, and what did I have going on that was so important anyway? I added it up once, the way an accountant does, almost as a dark joke to myself. Years of weekend babysitting, the birthday parties I funded because Roxanne was a little short, the school clothes I quietly bought the kids, the dinners I covered, the time, the uncountable hours of my one life spent making my sister's life easier. It came to a number that would have been a down payment on a house. And the thing about that number is that nobody in my family would have believed it because, in their version of events, I hadn't given anything. I'd just done what Shauna does. Giving, when it's expected of you and never acknowledged, doesn't register as generosity to the people receiving it. It registers as the natural order. Water doesn't thank the riverbed. There it was again. What did I have going on that was so important? The assumption always that my life was emptier than theirs, that my time was worth less, that a single woman without children was just a reservoir of availability for the people whose lives actually mattered. My evenings, my weekends, my money, all of it was treated as commonly held property, and the held in common part only ever flowed one direction. I used to lie awake wondering why it stung so much. A comment as small as, "What do you have going on anyway?" And eventually I understood. It stung because it was an accounting of my worth, delivered casually, and the figure they'd assigned was 0. My time had no value because I had no one watching it but me, and in my family, a thing only had value if someone important wanted it. I was important to no one, so my hours belonged to everyone. That was the equation. And I'd lived inside it so long I'd stopped checking whether it was true. And the children growing up inside this learned it too. That's the part that hurt the most, honestly, and the part I had to forgive them for later. Bren, Kaylin, and Dee learned from watching their mother that Aunt Shanna was staff, not family, staff. They learned to order me around because they watched Roxanne do it. They learned that my no didn't count because they watched my no get overruled by their grandmother. By the time Bren was 11, he'd snap his fingers for a drink refill and not look up from his tablet. Kaylin would announce what she wanted for dinner as though I were a waitress. Dee, the baby, would cry to me for things and then, comforted, toddle back to his mother. Even his comfort was something I provided and she received credit for. They weren't born rude. They were raised to treat me exactly the way the adults treated me. And children are only ever mirrors of what they're shown. I never blame them, not really. I blame the woman holding up the mirror. So I want to be clear, before the resort, before the phone call, I was not a martyr who enjoyed this. I was tired. I was 36 years old and tired in my bones of being the one who counted least and gave most. But I didn't know how to stop because every time I tried, the whole family turned on me as if I'd committed a crime by having a limit. If you grew up as the sensible one whose reward was always more to carry, tell me in the comments. I think the reliable ones are the most quietly exhausted people alive. Now, the trip. This past spring, something in me reached a breaking point, the good kind, the kind that breaks toward yourself instead of away. I'd just come out of a long relationship that ended quietly, and a hard tax season, and I was sitting alone one night, feeling the particular emptiness of a person who takes care of everyone and is taken care of by no one. And I thought, I'm going to do something for myself. Just once. Something I actually want. I remember the exact moment it crystallized. It was late, and I was scrolling on my couch, and I landed on a photo of this resort in the Keys. The white buildings, the water, a single lounge chair under a palm with nobody in it, just waiting for a person to come sit and be at peace. And I felt this ache so sharp, it surprised me. Not for a man, not for the relationship that ended, for that chair, for the idea of being a person who got to sit in it. I'd spent my whole life as the one who set up everyone else's chairs and folded them at the end of the day. And I thought, with a kind of trembling boldness that felt almost illegal, what if I just booked the chair? For me. So I planned a trip. And because planning is the thing I'm good at, the thing that's mine, I did it beautifully. A week at a gorgeous resort in the Florida Keys, the kind with the white buildings and the water so clear it doesn't look real, the kind I'd looked at in photos for years and never let myself book. I got an ocean view suite. I arranged the airport transfer. I planned little things for myself. A sunset sail, a morning where I do absolutely nothing but read on the sand. A dinner at the place on the water where you're supposed to watch the sun go down. I booked it all under my name, on my card with my carefully saved money. And every time I clicked confirm, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I was a person who mattered to somebody, even if that somebody was only me. Maybe especially because that somebody was only me. It was the first time in my adult life I had treated myself as the person worth doing things for. It was going to be the first vacation of my adult life that was entirely, selfishly, gloriously mine. And I use the word selfishly on purpose because in my family, doing one single thing for yourself instead of for Roxanne was the definition of selfish. And I had decided at 36 that I was finally willing to be called the bad word in exchange for the chair. I made the mistake of mentioning it at a family dinner. Just once, just glowing a little, because I was proud of myself, and some lonely part of me wanted, stupidly, for my family to be proud of me too. To say, good for you, Shauna. You deserve it. I said I'd booked a trip to the Keys in July, and I watched my mother's face do a thing I should have recognized as a warning, a kind of calculating brightening. The Keys, in July, oh, how nice. And I foolishly thought she was happy for me. She was not assessing my happiness. She was assessing an asset. I had shown a hungry family a plate of food and mistaken their interest for being glad I'd eaten. A week later, my mother called me to her house, and she told me what was going to happen in the tone of a woman announcing a decision already made. I've been thinking, she said, about your little Florida trip. She was at her kitchen counter, not even looking fully at me, doing something with dishes, the way she delivered all her most important verdicts, sideways, casually, as if they were too settled to need eye contact. And it just seems like such a waste, Shauna. One person rattling around in a fancy resort by herself. Meanwhile, Roxanne is exhausted, Those poor kids haven't had a real vacation in ages, and she can't possibly afford anything like that on her own. So I told her she should take it, your trip. The kids will get the beach, Roxanne will get a break, and everybody's happy. I told her she should take it, as though it were already done, as though my months of planning and my saved money and my name on the booking were just raw materials my mother could reallocate by decree. I remember the kitchen going very quiet around me. I remember the hum of her refrigerator, the same refrigerator I'd stood in front of as a 12-year-old, being told not to be difficult about a toy. "Mom," I said carefully, the old careful, the lifelong careful. I planned that trip for me. I booked it for myself. It's my vacation. And that's when she said it. She waved her hand, the way you'd wave off a child asking for something silly. And she said, "Oh, don't be dramatic, Shauna. It's not like you had anyone to bring anyway. Roxanne has the kids. They'll actually use it." And then the smile, the warm, terrible smile. "You can still come, of course. You can help with the children. Somebody's got to watch them at the pool while Roxanne relaxes. And you'll cover the incidentals, won't you, since it's all under your name already. You're so good with the money part. I want to break down everything that was in that little speech, because it was a perfect crystallization of my entire life. It's not like you had anyone to bring my singleness, my solitude, the very loneliness that had driven me to plan something kind for myself, weaponized as the reason I didn't deserve it. As if a woman alone couldn't be worth a beautiful room. As if joy required an audience or a husband to be valid. They'll actually use it. As if my joy didn't count as use. As if a vacation only mattered if loud people with children consumed it. As if my quiet pleasure in a chair under a palm was a waste of good oceanfront. You can help with the children. My role, restated plainly, staff. Not even a guest who'd help out, but a worker who'd be permitted to attend. You'll cover the incidentals. The bank, restated. Since it's all under your name already. And there, buried in the insult without her even noticing she'd said it, was the single most important fact of this entire story. It was all under my name already. She'd said it like an inconvenience. Like the booking being under my name was just a clerical detail to be worked around. A small mess for sensible Shauna to tidy up so the deserving people could enjoy themselves. She truly did not register it as power. In her mind, my name on the reservation was just more evidence of my usefulness, the way my name was on everything inconvenient, the one who handled the booking, like the one who handled the babysitting, like the one who handled the money. She had no idea she'd just reminded me, out loud, that I was holding the only key to a door she thought she'd already given away. I didn't argue. I want to tell you exactly why, because it's the same reason that runs through every one of these stories. I didn't argue because arguing has never once worked. In 36 years, I had never won a single confrontation with my mother, because the moment I pushed back, the family script activated. Shauna's being difficult. Shauna's being selfish. Shauna's making a thing out of nothing after everything this family does for her. If I'd stood in that kitchen and said, "No, this is mine. You can't give away my vacation," I would have become the villain by dinner time. Roxanne would have cried about how she never gets anything nice. My mother would have called me cold, ungrateful, jealous of my sister. And the worst part, the part I knew with total certainty, is that I would have lost anyway. They'd have guilted me into sharing it, and I'd have ended up exactly where my mother said, at that resort, paying, watching 3 kids in a pool while my sister got a tan, choking down the knowledge that I'd been bullied out of my own gift. So I didn't fight on their terms. I said, "Okay, Mom," 2 words. I watched the satisfaction settle over her face. Sensible Shauna falling into line, as always. And I drove home, and I sat in my quiet apartment, and I thought about it clearly, the way I think about a set of books that doesn't balance. Here was the truth of the situation, stripped of all the family theater. This trip existed because of me. My planning, my name, my money, my card, guaranteeing every room and every charge. My mother had given Roxanne something that was not my mother's to give and that did not actually exist independently of me. The whole beautiful week was a structure resting entirely on a single pillar, and the pillar was me, and everyone had simply forgotten that. Because they'd spent so long treating me as the infrastructure that they no longer saw the infrastructure at all. You stop seeing the floor you stand on. You only notice it when it's gone. I wasn't going to fight them for the floor. And sitting there, I felt something shift that had never shifted before in 36 years. It wasn't rage exactly. Rage I knew, rage I'd swallowed 1,000 times. This was colder and clearer and almost peaceful. The feeling of an accountant who has finally found the one entry that makes the whole ledger make sense. My entire life, I've been trying to win their love by giving more, by being more useful, by never being the problem. And it had never worked. Because you cannot earn your way out of being treated like a function by functioning harder. The only way out was to stop, not to argue about being the floor, just to quietly cease to be it and let them feel for the first time what they'd actually been standing on. I was just going to quietly stop being it. The next morning, I called the resort. I want to be very clear about what I did, because it matters that it was clean. I did not commit fraud. I did not cancel something that belonged to someone else. I called the resort where Shauna Howell, the name on every line of the reservation, the card holder, guaranteeing the entire stay, had a booking, and I made changes to my own reservation. I told them politely that my plans had changed, that I would no longer be the guest, and I wished to remove my card as the guarantee and cancel the booking under my name within the cancellation window, which, because I read the terms the way Roxanne never has and never will, I was still comfortably inside. The booking was mine. The payment guarantee was mine. Canceling it was entirely within my rights. The kind woman on the phone processed it without blinking. It is, after all, the most ordinary thing in the world for the person who booked a room to cancel the room. No alarm bells, no drama, just a few keystrokes, undoing a thing I had every right to undo, because it had been mine to make and was mine to unmake. And then, and this is the part I'm a little proud of, I asked her a second question. I asked whether they had availability for one guest, a single ocean view suite for that same week, at their sister property a little further down the Keys. The nicer one. The one I'd looked at first and talked myself out of because it felt too indulgent for a person like me, a person who didn't deserve nice things just for herself. The one with a chair under the palm. They had a room. I booked it, under my name, on my card, for one. And I did not tell a single soul. My family thought I'd surrendered. They thought sensible Shauna had said, "Okay, Mom," and folded, like always. They had no idea that the floor had quietly picked itself up and walked to a better building. That's who I won't pretend the next few weeks were comfortable. They were awful, in a low, simmering way, because I had to watch them be happy about it. I had to sit at family dinners and listen to Roxanne talk about her trip, the trip I'd designed down to the sunset sail, like it had materialized out of the sky as her due. I had to watch my mother glow with the satisfaction of a woman who'd redistributed a resource correctly. I had to see Roxanne posting online about her upcoming Mama and Babies Beach Week, tagging the resort, counting down the days, accepting congratulations from her friends. The children talked about it constantly. Bren wanted to know if there were jet skis. Kaylin wanted to know if she could have ice cream every day. Little Dee just kept saying, "Beach, beach, beach," in the way 6-year-olds do. And this, I'll be honest with you, because this whole story is me being honest. This is the part that nearly made me undo it. More than once, my thumb hovered over the resort's number, ready to call back, to uncancel, to quietly put the floor back down so the kids wouldn't fall. Because I love those kids, and a real part of me twisted at the thought of them showing up somewhere expecting joy and finding a closed door. That's the hook, you see. That's the exact hook my family had used on me my whole life. Think of the children. Be the bigger person. You can absorb this. You always do. The guilt was the leash, and I'd worn it so long I could put it on myself without anyone's help. But every time I wavered, I made myself look at the truth straight on. I was not the one putting those children in that position. Roxanne was. My mother was. They were the ones who had taken a vacation that didn't belong to them, built their kids' hopes on money that wasn't theirs, and gambled their children's happiness on the assumption that sensible, reliable, walked-over Shauna would once again absorb the cost without complaint. If those kids ended up disappointed, it would not be because their aunt reclaimed her own trip. It would be because their mother and grandmother had wagered them on a bluff, betting their children's beach week on the certainty that I would never, ever stand up. The cruelty, if there was cruelty, was in the betting, not in my finally declining to be the chip. They had taught the whole family that I had no edges. They were about to find out I'd grown one, and they'd handed me the knife themselves. The day they reminded me it was all under my name, I let them pack. If you've ever had to choose between protecting people who took advantage of you and finally protecting yourself, tell me below what you chose. I know how heavy that quiet kind of decision is, and how long some of us carry it before we make it. Check-in day was a Tuesday in the middle of July. They flew down, Roxanne and the 3 kids, while I, the morning of, was already 2 hours further south, checking into my own suite at the sister resort, alone, with a paperback and no one's drink to refill. I want you to know where I was when it happened. I was standing on a balcony over water so clear it didn't look real, the exact view I'd looked at in photos for years. The chair under the palm, finally real and finally mine. And for the first time in my adult life, the only person I was responsible for that week was me. I had a strange, calm awareness standing there of the time. I knew roughly when their flight landed. I knew roughly when they'd reach the other resort, an hour up the road. I did not feel triumphant exactly, and I did not feel cruel. I felt the way you feel when you finally set down something you've carried so long you'd stopped noticing its weight. That lightness that's almost like grief, because part of you misses the carrying, because the carrying had become who you were. I poured myself a coffee. I sat in the chair. And somewhere up the coast, at almost exactly that moment, my sister was walking up to a front desk with 3 children and a confidence that had never once in her life been tested. I wasn't there for what happened at the other resort, but I heard it in such detail from so many directions. From Roxanne's furious retellings, from a cousin who got it from Roxanne, from Bren himself much later, that I can tell it to you like I was standing in the lobby myself. Roxanne walked up to that beautiful front desk with 3 tired, excited children and a luggage cart, glowing, expectant, ready for the week my mother had promised her. She gave the clerk her name, Roxanne Price. The clerk smiled and typed, and then stopped smiling and typed again, and then said the words that begin every collapse like this one. "I'm sorry. I'm not finding a reservation under that name. Do you have a confirmation number?" Roxanne did not have a confirmation number because Roxanne had never booked anything in her life. Things were always booked for her. Things appeared the way they'd always appeared, conjured by other people's planning and other people's money, and she had reached an age where she genuinely believed that was simply how the world worked for her. She gave my name instead, Shanna Howell, a little impatiently, the impatience of a woman not used to friction. The clerk typed it, and there it was, or rather, there it wasn't. A reservation under Shanna Howell, canceled. No guarantee on file, no room held. Nothing for Roxanne Price or any party of 4. The week in paradise simply did not exist, and at the center of where it used to be was a canceled booking with my name on it, and no card behind it. I'm told my sister argued. I'm told she got loud, the way Roxanne gets loud. The spirited girl loud that had moved mountains in our family for 39 years, insisting there had to be a mistake, that her mother had arranged it, that it was all paid for, that they couldn't possibly turn away a woman with 3 children. And the clerk, patient and a little bewildered, kept saying the same true thing, the thing that no amount of Roxanne's noise could bend. Because a resort computer in high season does not love her the way our mother loved her. There was no payment, ma'am. The only reservation associated with these names was canceled by the card holder. "We have nothing available. It's the middle of July. We're fully booked. I'm so sorry." For the first time in her life, my sister's loudness met a wall that simply did not care how loud she was. The tantrum that had always worked met a polite, immovable stranger in a fully booked hotel. And it did nothing. It just echoed in a marble lobby while strangers pretended not to watch. And that's when my sister sank to the floor of the lobby, right down onto the cool marble with her 3 children standing around her, not understanding, and the line of vacationers behind her not knowing where to look. The spirited girl, the one the whole family had bent itself around for 39 years, sitting on the floor of a resort that had no idea who she was, because the only person who had ever made her comfortable life run had finally quietly stopped. She had spent her whole life being caught every time she let herself fall. She had simply never once checked whether the person who always caught her was still standing there. This time, where I wasn't. This time, there was just the floor. Here is the part I had to make my peace with, and the part that matters most to me in the whole story. My sister deserved that floor. I'm not going to pretend otherwise to seem gracious. Roxanne had spent 39 years taking, and she had taken my vacation with a smile, and she had been willing to make me the paid help at my own dream. And the woman who sank to that marble had earned every cold inch of it, but the children did not deserve it. And I had known going in that they'd be there. That's the weight I carried down to my balcony and sat with alone that week. I hadn't done it to them. I'd done it to a structure their mother built, but they were standing in the rubble all the same. 3 kids who'd been promised a beach and got a scene on a lobby floor instead. Bren, 11, old enough to understand that something had gone deeply wrong and to feel the hot shame of strangers staring at his family. Kaylin, 8, crying because the magic she'd been promised had evaporated into a fully booked computer screen. D, 6, just frightened by his mother on the floor, not understanding any of it, only that the adults had stopped working the way adults are supposed to. I've turned this over many times because it's the one part that doesn't sit easy, and I don't think it's supposed to. The honest accounting is this. In protecting myself, I could not perfectly protect them because their mother had deliberately bound their week to my surrender. The only way to spare the children completely would have been to fund and staff my own robbery one more time, to teach them, and Roxanne, and my mother, that the floor would always be there forever, no matter what they did to it. And I had finally understood that a floor that can never be removed isn't kindness. It's how the whole arrangement survives. Sometimes the only way to teach a family that a person is real is to let them feel, just once, the shape of the space where that person used to lie down, and let them walk. I won't tell you it didn't hurt me to know that. It did. I am not made of stone, whatever my family decided about me. But I had finally learned the thing it takes some of us decades to learn. That I am not responsible for the fallout of other people's selfishness. And that protecting myself is not the same as harming them. Roxanne harmed those kids that day. I had simply, for the first time, declined to be the thing that absorbed the harm so she'd never have to feel it. For 36 years, I'd been the shock absorber of this family, the one who quietly soaked up every consequence so the reckless ones never had to learn anything, and a shock absorber that never lets anyone feel an impact is also the reason no one ever changes. By always catching Roxanne, I had helped build the woman who would gamble her own children's vacation on the assumption I'd catch her again. What I learned later, though weeks later, is the part that gives this story its real ending. Because in that lobby, in the rubble of it, one small thing happened that nobody told me about until much later, and that I only understood when my nephew finally explained it himself. Bren, 11 years old, the oldest, the one who'd snapped his fingers at me for refills, had not gotten loud like his mother. While Roxanne sat on the floor and raged at the clerk, Bren had stood a little apart, holding his little brother's hand because nobody else was. And at some point in all that noise and shame, he had thought of me. He told me later that he'd stood there in that staring lobby feeling small and humiliated and invisible, and that a strange thought had come to him, fully formed, the way true things sometimes arrive in children. This is what it feels like. This is maybe what we made Aunt Shauna feel. He didn't say anything then. He was 11 and frightened, and it wasn't the moment. But a seed had landed. I didn't know it yet, sitting on my balcony down the coast. But the only person in that whole family who reacted to the floor by growing instead of screaming was the 11-year-old. As the fallout came fast and loud, the way it always does. My phone, by the time I came in off that balcony, was a wall of messages. My mother, furious. "What have you done? Your sister is stranded with 3 children. How could you be so cruel and vindictive after everything this family has done for you?" Roxanne, between sobs and rage. "You ruined my children's vacation. You selfish, jealous, and worse. Much worse." The family chat lighting up with aunts and cousins, demanding to know how I could do something so heartless to my own sister and those poor babies. I read them all standing in my quiet, beautiful room, and I noticed something. Not one of them, not one, asked whether what my mother had done was cruel. Nobody wrote, "Was it wrong of us to take your trip?" Nobody wrote, "Wait, wasn't that Shauna's vacation in the first place?" The entire moral weight of the family had landed, instantly and unanimously, on me for declining to fund and staff my own theft. That told me everything. It confirmed, in a single scroll of my thumb, that I had been right about exactly who I was to them. Not a sister, not a daughter, but a function. And functions aren't supposed to say no. When a function says no, it isn't experienced as a person setting a boundary. It's experienced as a machine malfunctioning. They weren't angry at a sister. They were angry at an appliance that had stopped working. And you don't apologize to an appliance. You bang on it and demand to know what's wrong with it. And that recognition, strangely, was the last thing I needed. Because for years, a small voice in me had whispered that maybe I was imagining the whole thing. Maybe I really was just selfish and cold. And they really did love me equally. And I was the problem. That wall of messages, every single one of them blaming me, and not one of them questioning the theft, was proof. I wasn't imagining it. I had been exactly as used as I'd always felt, and now I had it in writing. In a group chat, from the whole chorus at once. I wrote one message back to the family chat, and then I put my phone away for the rest of the week. I wrote, "I planned that trip for myself." Mom gave away something that was never hers to give and asked me to pay for it and babysit through it. I didn't cancel your vacation. I canceled my reservation, the only one that ever existed. If that ends the trip, then the trip was always only mine. I'm sorry the kids are hurt. That's real, and I mean it. But that's on the adults who bet their week on my silence. I'm done being the silence. Then I turned it off, and I went and watched my sunset sail alone on the water I dreamed about for years. And I cried a little, and almost all of the crying was relief. I sat on that boat as the sky went orange and then pink and then that deep bruised blue, and I realized I could not remember the last time I had done something that was only for me, with no one to serve, no one to please, no one's drink to refill, no one's feelings to manage. I was 36 years old, And I was, for the first time, simply a guest in my own life instead of the staff. When I got home, the war was still going. My mother did not apologize. My mother has still never apologized. And I've made my peace with the fact that she may never understand she did anything but generously redistribute a resource. In her version of the story told to anyone who'll listen, she is a loving grandmother who arranged a beautiful trip for her grandbabies. And I am the bitter, jealous spinster aunt who snatched it away out of spite because I couldn't stand to see other people happy. She believes that. I've stopped needing her not to. Roxanne did not apologize either. Roxanne told everyone I'd abandoned her children in Florida, conveniently leaving out that she'd flown them there on a booking she didn't make and couldn't pay for, that she'd packed 3 kids and headed to an airport on the strength of a thing she'd never confirmed, because confirming things was always somebody else's job. The spoiled, in my experience, do not become unspoiled because the floor finally rose up to meet them. They just get louder about the unfairness of floors. But then 3 weeks after, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't have saved. A long message typed in the careful run-on way of a kid using a phone he's not supposed to have much. It was from Bren. I'm going to tell you what my 11-year-old nephew wrote, because it's the thing that healed something in me that the whole rest of it couldn't. He wrote that he was sorry, not the forced kind of sorry a parent makes a kid type. Roxanne would never have made him apologize to me. She was far too busy being the victim of her own choices. This was his own, sent secretly from a phone he'd borrowed, words he'd clearly worked up the nerve to send. He wrote that he'd been thinking about it, about the lobby, about how scared and small he'd felt with everyone staring, and that he'd started thinking about how that was maybe a little bit how I always seemed around them. And he'd never noticed before. He wrote, and I have this memorized, every clumsy, beautiful word of it. I think we were not very nice to you for a long time, and I didn't even really see it until I was the one sitting on the floor. I'm sorry, Aunt Shauna. You always did everything for us, and we treated you like you worked for us. I don't want to be like that. Mom is still really mad, but I don't think you did a bad thing. I think we did. 11 years old. He saw it. In the rubble of that week, sitting on a floor while strangers stared, my nephew had felt for one single afternoon a small version of what I'd felt for 36 years, what it is to be treated as if you don't matter in public by the people who are supposed to love you. And instead of getting angry the way his mother did, the way his grandmother did, the way the whole loud chorus of my family did, he got thoughtful. He turned it into a question about himself, which is the single hardest thing a human being can do with pain. To feel it and ask, have I done this to someone else? Instead of just, who can I blame? At 11, he did the thing the adults in my family have never once managed to do in their entire lives. I cried over that message in a way I had not cried over any of the cruelty. Not over my mother's furious texts or Roxanne's accusations or 36 years of being the help. Because here is the truth about those kids that I'd held on to even when they snapped their fingers at me. They were not born to be like Roxanne. They were taught to be. And a child who can be taught a thing can also, if someone shows them another way, unlearn it. Bren had just shown me he could unlearn it. He'd done it himself, watching the way children learn everything. Except this time, what he'd learned was empathy. And he'd learned it from the one experience his mother and grandmother had spent their whole lives carefully avoiding: the experience of being on the floor with no one rising to catch them, feeling for once the weight of the thing they'd always made someone else carry. I wrote Bren back. I told him the truth, that I loved him, that none of what happened was his fault, that kids learn how to treat people from the grown-ups around them, and that the fact that he'd noticed and cared made me prouder of him than he could know. I told him that being able to sit in someone else's shoes, to feel in a lobby what another person might feel for years, was the rarest and most important thing a person could learn, and that most adults never learn it. And he'd done it at 11. And I told him something I meant with my whole chest, that when he was older, old enough to travel on his own without anybody arranging it for him or putting it on someone else's card, I would take him somewhere beautiful myself, just because I wanted to. Because that's what you do for people you love when nobody's making you, and because I wanted him to know the difference between being given something out of obligation and being given something out of love. I'd had a lifetime of giving out of obligation. I wanted to give him, someday, the other kind. I didn't promise the other two anything yet. They're younger. They're still inside the lesson their mother is teaching. And I've learned not to make promises across a gap I can't yet see across. Kaylin still thinks I ruined her vacation. Dee is too little to think anything at all. But the door's open. Doors can stay open without you holding them. I learned that this summer, too, that you can love people and still not carry them. That an open door is not the same as a floor. My relationship with my mother and Roxanne is essentially over in its old form. I still see them. We're civil at the obligatory things, the birthdays and the holidays where everyone performs a family that doesn't really exist anymore. But the function is decommissioned. I don't babysit on demand anymore. I don't cover the incidentals. I don't drop my life when Roxanne's falls apart. When my mother starts a sentence with, "Shauna, you're so sensible, would you just..." I have learned to say kindly and completely, no. No explanation, no apology trailing after it, no softening clause to make the no easier for them to receive. Just no. It is the most powerful word I own, and I went 36 years barely using it because I'd been taught that a good daughter doesn't have a no in her, that my whole value was in my yes. My Aunt Vernell, my mother's younger sister, the one person in the older generation who'd always given me a quiet look of solidarity across all those years. The look that said, "I see what they do to you, and I'm sorry, and I don't know how to stop it," called me after it all shook out. She said, "Baby, I have been waiting your whole life for you to do something like this. I watched my sister turn you into the help before you were old enough to drive, and it broke my heart. And I never said anything because that's not what we do in this family, and I'm ashamed of that now. I just didn't think you had it in you to ever stop. I'm so glad I was wrong." I cried at that too, because Vernell had been a version of me, a generation up, the quiet sister to a loud one, the one who learned to keep the peace by keeping silent. And she was telling me, in her way that she'd never managed to do what I'd just done, and that watching me do it had given her something. That meant more than I can say. We talk now, Vernell and I, in a way we never did before. Two women who finally found, late, the word no. And I think we are each less alone for it. People ask me, the few I've told, whether I feel guilty about my sister on that floor, about the kids' ruined week. And I've thought about it honestly, the way I think about everything. No, I don't feel guilty. I feel something better and quieter than that. I feel returned to myself. For 36 years, I was the floor everyone walked on and never saw. And the price of being walked on was that I forgot I was a person with a name and a card, and a right to my own joy. The phone call didn't just cancel a reservation. It canceled an entire arrangement, the lifelong agreement signed by everyone but me, that Shauna's things are everyone's, and everyone's needs are Shauna's. What surprised me most in the months after was how little I missed the role. I'd been so afraid my whole life of what would happen if I stopped. Afraid the family would fall apart, afraid I'd be alone, afraid that without my usefulness, I would be nothing. Because usefulness was the only value I'd ever been assigned. And then I stopped, and the family did not fall apart. It simply rearranged itself around the absence of its floor, the way a household notices, briefly, when an appliance breaks, and then adapts. Roxanne found other people to lean on, or learned, a little, to stand. My mother found new things to be disappointed in me about, and I discovered that the hours I'd spent being useful were now simply mine, and that I was not nothing without my usefulness. I was, in fact, far more myself. My mother said it wasn't like I had anyone to bring anyway. She was right that I went alone. She was wrong about what that meant. I went to a better resort, a more beautiful one, the one I'd never let myself have, and I spent a week as the only person I had to take care of. And I discovered that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing at all. That I'd actually been lonelier sitting in a crowd of people who only wanted what I could give them than I ever was on that balcony by myself. There is a loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who don't see you, and it is far worse than the clean, quiet solitude of a woman in a chair under a palm, watching the water, accountable to no one. One is an absence pretending to be company. The other is just peace. I had someone to bring all along. I just hadn't learned yet that she was worth bringing. Her name was on the reservation the whole time. It was mine. And the day I remembered that, the day I made one quiet phone call instead of one loud scene, was the day I finally stopped being the family's floor and started being the woman whose name was on everything, who could at last simply take it back. I think about that chair under the palm sometimes, the one in the photo that started all of it. The empty chair I ached over on my couch that lonely spring night. For years, I thought the ache was about wanting someone to sit beside me in it. It wasn't. The ache was about wanting to be allowed to sit in it at all, to be a person worth a beautiful, useless, joyful thing, instead of only the person who arranges beautiful things for everyone else. I sat in that chair, finally, alone. And it turned out alone was not the tragedy my mother thought it was. It turned out alone on your own terms, with your own name on the door, is one of the freest things a person can be. My name was on the reservation. It always had been. I just had to remember that the name on the thing is the person who gets to decide what happens to it, and that after 36 years was finally, gloriously me. Not the help, not the bank, not the floor. Just Shauna, whose name was on the door, who got to choose at last to walk through it, alone and unafraid.